African-American athlete in wrestling history who turned a lot of heads with his Coco Butt, Bobo Brazil.
Racism can truly be horrible, especially when it robs someone of their career. Sadly, WWE, or wrestling in general back then, wasn't any different. Bobo Brazil went through it all. He had so much talent and so much potential to be a huge star, but the racism he faced wasn't even hidden. It was right there in front of everyone. No matter how good he was or how much he proved himself, the bias kept pulling him back. It's heartbreaking to think how much more he could have done if he had just been given a fair chance. So where do we even begin? In the early days of his career, Bobo Brazil didn't get the chances he truly deserved. Promoters often restricted him to wrestling only against other black wrestlers because of the racial segregation that ruled the country back then. It wasn't about who was the better wrestler or who could sell tickets. It was purely about the color of his skin. Even the fans faced the same kind of discrimination. In a lot of venues, black fans were forced to sit in separate sections, usually way up in the worst seats, far away from the action. It didn't matter if they had paid the same money or if they cheered just as loud. They simply weren't treated the same. And yet, even with all these obstacles, Bobo Brazil still became a star. Fans of all races loved him. He had a presence, a charisma that couldn't be denied. He connected with people everywhere he went. But despite his growing popularity, he kept getting held back. He wasn't given the same opportunities that white wrestlers were getting, especially when it came to something as big as World Championship recognition. No matter how hard he worked, the system always found a way to keep him a step behind. What makes it even more heartbreaking is that the discrimination didn't stop when he left the ring. Just like many African Americans during that time, Brazil faced racism everywhere. There were restaurants he wasn't allowed to eat at, hotels that refused to give him a room, even after he had just headlined a packed show in that very city. Imagine being a star, a real main event attraction, and still being treated like you didn't belong. That was Bobo's reality. Inside the wrestling world, it was just as tough. Some promoters were scared to book him against white wrestlers because they feared it might upset the audience. They worried that seeing a black man beat a white man in the ring would cause fights to break out or even bigger problems. So for a long time, Bobo's opponents were limited. His matches were limited. His storylines were limited. The full potential of his career, the heights he could have reached, were put on hold just because of fear and ignorance. But Bobo Brazil wasn't just good, he was great, and eventually his talent forced people to change, even if it was slower than it should have been. He started facing white wrestlers and fans loved it. He became a true pioneer, breaking barriers just by stepping into the ring night after night and showing that talent had no color. And then there's the moment that still leaves a sour taste. A moment that should have been one of the greatest achievements in wrestling history, but ended up being one of the most unfair. On October 18, 1962, Bobo Brazil faced Nature Boy Buddy Rogers for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. In a match that had the crowd on fire, Bobo defeated Rogers. He won the match. He beat the champion. That should have been it. He should have been crowned the new NWA World Heavyweight Champion, standing tall as the top man in the business. But that's not what happened. The NWA never officially recognized the title change. They found reasons to deny it. Some people said it was because the win came after a controversial groin shot, that Rogers wasn't fairly beaten. Others, though, believed the truth was much uglier, that the NWA simply didn't want a black man holding their most important title. And to make things even more complicated, Brazil himself refused to accept the title under those circumstances. He didn't want to win it through controversy. He wanted a clean, undeniable victory. That shows you the kind of man he was. Someone who believed in doing things the right way, even when the system wasn't treating him right. The controversy around that match still lingers today. Some wrestling historians call it a dusty finish, a wrestling term for when a match has an ending that leaves everything unclear or is later overturned, usually to create drama or protect a champion. But in Bobo's case, it feels less like storytelling and more like pure unfairness. Imagine what it would have meant if Bobo Brazil had been officially recognized as the NWA World Heavyweight Champion back in 1962. It wouldn't have just been a personal victory. It would have been a massive moment for wrestling history. It could have shattered racial barriers much earlier. It could have inspired generations of wrestlers and fans alike. But instead, it became another example of how deeply racism was rooted in the sport at the time. Even after that, controversy seemed to follow him. Whenever he got close to the top, there was always some excuse, some reason to deny him the ultimate prize. Yet despite all the obstacles, Bobo Brazil never stopped fighting. He kept wrestling, he kept entertaining, and most importantly, he kept breaking down walls so that future generations wouldn't have to face the same struggles he did. Let's rewind and see how it all began. Bobo Brazil, whose real name was Houston Harris, found his way into the wrestling world thanks to a lucky meeting with Joe Savoldi at the Naval Armory. Savoldi saw something special in Harris and took him under his wing, training him and helping him take his first steps into the business. At first, Savoldi gave him the name Bobo Brazil, the South American giant, dressing him up with a flashy, sequined satin cape that Harris's wife had lovingly stitched together. But then something funny happened. A promoter messed up and printed his name as Bobo instead of Boo Boo in an ad. Instead of fixing it, the name just stuck. And from then on, Houston Harris would be known to the world as Bobo Brazil. Now back then, things weren't easy for black wrestlers, especially in the South. Segregation was everywhere, and African-American wrestlers were usually only booked to wrestle other African-Americans. But Bobo was so good and so popular that promoters couldn't ignore him. They started putting him in matches against white wrestlers, not because they suddenly stopped being prejudiced, but because they realized Bobo could make them a lot of money. His popularity started breaking down barriers, one match at a time. Bobo's first recorded match took place on March 29, 1948, in Benton Harbor. Wrestling under the name Houston Harris, the Black Panther, he faced Armand Myers, and they fought to a 30-minute draw. From the beginning, Bobo carried himself differently. Joe Savoldi had taught him not just wrestling moves, but how to be a true professional. He told Bobo to always be honest in the ring, never cheat to win, and to be a friend to the crowd no matter what. Those lessons stuck with him his entire career. Finding his early success in Detroit, Bobo quickly became a major star. And it wasn't just the black fans cheering for him. He drew in fans of all races. His modesty, sharp sense of style, and professionalism made him a favorite with everyone. He wasn't flashy with his words. He let his actions in and out of the ring speak for themselves. Even so, despite his growing fame, Bobo still had to deal with ugly racism and discrimination, both inside and outside the arenas. Inside the ring, Bobo faced some of the biggest and baddest names in wrestling history. He went toe-to-toe with legends like Killer Kowalski, Dick the Bruiser, Johnny Valentine, Haystacks Calhoun, and of course, the Sheik. His feud with the Sheik would go on for decades and was known for being especially brutal and bloody. Fans would pack the arenas just to see these two tear into each other, and their matches became legendary. One by one, many of Bobo's opponents would fall victim to his powerful finishing move, the famous Coco Butt, a devastating headbutt that could take down even the toughest wrestler. Over the years, Bobo faced a who's who of wrestling's top stars. He battled Bill Miller to a draw, and even challenged Bruno Sammartino for the WWF World Heavyweight Championship. Back then, having two fan-favorite good guys go at it wasn't very common, but Bobo and Bruno made it work because fans simply loved them both too much. Then on October 18, 1962, Bobo Brazil beat Buddy Rogers for the NWA World Heavyweight title after Rogers was injured during the match. But Bobo refused to accept the belt, not wanting to win that way. They had a rematch weeks later, and Rogers won. At the time, it was common for promoters to script controversial finishes like this, but many believed race was a major reason the NWA never officially crowned Bobo as champion. Still, Bobo kept pushing forward, breaking down walls that others had never even dared to touch. On October 9, 1970, Bobo Brazil and El Mongol made history by defeating Mr. Ito and the Great Ota in what became the first racially mixed tag team match in Atlanta history. It was another major milestone, and it showed just how far Bobo's influence had reached. Bobo wasn't just a trailblazer in the ring either. He became a mentor to other rising black athletes, including Soulman Rocky Johnson, who would later go on to become a major star himself and is the father of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Even boxing legend Joe Frazier found inspiration in Bobo Brazil's story and strength. During his long career, Bobo also had the support of James Dudley, who served as his manager. Dudley was a history maker too. He became the first African American to be in charge of a major arena in the United States. Whenever Bobo made his way to the ring, Dudley would run ahead, waving a towel high in the air, while Bobo followed behind, ready to take care of business. After wrestling for over 4 decades, Bobo Brazil finally retired in 1993. His final match was in Chicago, where he faced Kelly Kiniski, the son of his old rival, Gene Kiniski. It was a fitting way to close out an incredible career. In 1994, Bobo Brazil was honored for everything he had accomplished when he was inducted into the WWF Hall of Fame by none other than his longtime rival and friend, Ernie Ladd. A year later, Bobo returned the favor by inducting Ladd into the Hall of Fame as well. His journey wasn't just about winning matches or collecting championships. It was about breaking down barriers that once seemed impossible to move. It was about changing the way people thought, not just about wrestling, but about what was fair, what was right, and what true greatness really looked like. Bobo Brazil showed the world that talent, heart, and determination could shine through even in the face of the ugliest prejudice and toughest obstacles. He inspired generations, both inside and outside the ring, and proved that real heroes fight not just for themselves, but for everyone watching. And that wraps up today's video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss an update. Also, drop a comment and let us know what you think. We'd love to hear from you. See you soon, bye.